Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it's the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, we, as usual, have a fantastic show lined out for you today. We are broadcasting here or recording here instead of the studio today. We are in front of a roaring fire. It is still winter here at 4,200 feet in the mountains of southern Oregon, and we are staying warm with a roaring fire. So if you hear that or Kobra, the black shop cat, or Bacon the dog in the background, they are wandering around wondering what to make of this recording equipment and what's going on. So you'd think they'd be used to it by now, but they are not quite, I guess. Now, that being said, let's get into our show highlights. This is Season 2, Episode 3 of the Make It Out Alive broadcast. And for today's enjoyment and consideration, we have survival knives, serrations or not. Always a good topic. More fatalities in the great outdoors. Are axes worth the trouble on the trail? And a selfie stick beatdown served up family style. I don't know what this show would do without the state of Florida to continually serve up a long list of insane felonious activities. I try and actually keep the show on a fairly, maybe not serious tone, but a well-researched and serious topics. But it's impossible to keep a straight face when you read about the stuff that goes on a daily basis down there in Florida. Now, obviously, these things happen all over the country and all over the world. But Florida seems to have an inordinate concentration, an inordinately high concentration of these sorts of insane activities, and people who have no problem skipping all of their conflict resolution skills and steps and jumping straight to over-the-top violence, often while partially or completely unclothed. So anyway, as usual, we'll try and leave that story for the end. All right, where are we at? The other thing we're going to do is, we mentioned this before, it's been a constant theme of the MOA broadcast. We try and keep this politically neutral. I'm sure you can probably figure out what I probably believe on certain things and in certain directions and what my leanings may or may not be in certain ways. But we try not to stick your face in it and really to cover information that all people are going to find interesting and useful, and reporting on and discussing political topics and events is unavoidable. Everything has become political now. I mean, everything. So even, what color baseball cap you want to wear is now a political thing and gets people into fights and shootings. So that's unavoidable. But I tell you, in doing preparation for the show, you see a lot of things. I'm going to read dozens of articles every day. Take a coffee break and I'll skim through and read several articles. And then obviously show prep and so forth. But we're going to be focusing on the outdoors and preparation type of info and topics for a while, because the political rhetoric online, especially here in the States, it just continues to heat up, and it's impossible to separate some of these topics from the ideologies and the political leanings, left, right, red, blue, whatever in the world it is you want to believe, that are attached to these, these different topics and subjects and events. So when I go through and I read on X, which is Twitter, and other news sources, there are people on there on both sides, and everything in between in the middle, that, they post nonstop all day long. They're antagonizing and insulting and downright threatening and hateful and mean sometimes to people of the quote unquote other side of the political spectrum. And it's just so nasty. I feel like I need to take a shower, whenever or have a nice big shot of bourbon, whichever does it for you, afterwards, to cleanse my palate, because they are just so venomous and acidulous with each other. And it's the acrimony is you can cut it with a knife. And it's very difficult to sit there and take that in all day and not find yourself, getting tainted by that, and either leaning one way or the other, or just starting to have a bad day. So anyway, because I don't like all that negativity, so we're going to kind of try and wean off of that for a little bit. There are several stories we've covered in the past that have updates. We're going to try and get around to covering those. Probably in the next couple of weeks or so. There's no rush. There's going to be no end of political topics to discuss, or even current events that have political undertones anytime soon. One of the things that's been fascinating me recently, and I've actually for the last couple of years now, I've mentioned this in a number of shows, are not only the First Amendment auditors, but also the people that go and report on their activities and record and compile these different activities. And then there's some people that actually go and they will FOIA request. That's Freedom of Information Act. So if you're outside the U.S., there are certain things that are considered, and I know other countries have this as well, but there are certain things that are considered public information. And it may seem like it's very privileged information, but if it's considered public, then the public can get a hold of it, usually, by submitting what's called a FOIA request, or Freedom of Information Act request. And you can get police body cam and stuff like that, police reports, and all kind of military records and all sorts of other things by submitting FOIA requests. So, while a lot of these First Amendment auditors, in my opinion, just go out there and they like to antagonize people to get some wild clips for the YouTubes and, stir trouble up, and some of them are getting downright antagonistic. It's insane. Some of them are going out in groups of 3, 4, or 5 with their faces covered, and they're basically walking around and just like encircling people as they go through grocery store parking lots and other things to just bait them into flipping out. And it's as we mentioned before, we won't go into this again too much, but that's on the person. If what they're doing is legal, you can't just go and slap people's cameras out of their hands and other things. But they're not really doing it to further the cause of First Amendment freedom, freedom of speech and so forth. But the ones that do try and make a difference don't just do it for clicks. They will actually follow up on the lawsuits. They will take the arrest if they need to and then correct it and fight it in court. And they're actually fighting in a real way for their First Amendment rights and their beliefs. The people that are going out there and trying to antagonize people and get into confrontations and rage bait people into fistfights and pepper spray encounters, honestly, in my opinion, they're working against the First Amendment. Sooner or later, the government is probably going to step in if this trend continues long enough, and they will probably wind up limiting our rights even more as a countermeasure to these people that is going out there and basically starting trouble and using the First Amendment as the cloak under which they perform these nefarious activities, in my opinion. So anyways, if you go to some of these other channels, it is insane. I was just watching one the other day. Now, this is not just some guy in his basement somewhere, or like me out in the mountains with a radio broadcast available to him, going through conspiracy theories and all this stuff. This stuff is based on, they show the actual body cam provided by the police department. They have police reports, they have lawyers they interview, and so forth. These couple of cops, they were, I forget what they're called, DNR, Department of Natural Resources, I believe. And they had set up a deer decoy in this field, and some guy drives by in his truck, and he looks at the decoy with a pair of binoculars. That's it. He gets out of his truck or from his truck seat. He looks at the decoy, and clearly, you can see from the body cam they're talking, he recognizes it as a decoy, and he just drives on. He did not break any law. Okay, but you hear these two cops talking, or DNR agents, or whatever in the world, they're law enforcement officers. They basically decide they're going to arrest him. They figure out who he is. He's some kind of semi-famous local hunter who's got a Facebook page. I don't know what the whole thing was. I was kind of doing a bunch of other things while I saw it. But the guy has a little bit of notoriety. They start talking about how they're going to stop him. Then they trump it up into an arrest, and then they're going to seize his vehicle and all of his gear and somehow try and keep it. I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how that was supposed to take place, I guess under forfeiture of assets and so forth. But either way, these two cops were out of control, and the guy didn't break any law. In that particular instance, under the spotlighting or night, poaching, whatever the actual statute was called, you have to have a spotlight on the animal and have a loaded rifle or gun or whatever in the vehicle with you to meet the statutory requirements to actually, be guilty of that. Even if you didn't pull the trigger, if you have a spotlight on game like a deer, and you have a loaded rifle or whatever the other requirement, well, I don't know if it was a handgun would count or not, but it was a loaded firearm of some sort, then you met the statutory requirements. This guy did neither. He didn't spotlight, and they clearly state that he didn't shine his headlights even on this deer decoy, and he drove off. And they pulled him over, they arrested him, they towed his truck, all this stuff, drug it out for several months. He beat all the charges. They all got dropped because clearly he didn't do anything wrong. But they just drug him through the legal system, all because they were talking about this would be a career-making bust. I guess they figured because the guy was semi-famous or something. I'd never heard of him, but I don't really run in hunting circles online. I guess they figured it'd be a boost to their career. Well, guess what? It was a boost to their career. They're now being sued in civil court, or somebody is, because this guy is filing a lawsuit over the whole deal because he was treated, in my opinion, very, very unfairly. And apparently the state agreed because they dropped all the charges. They tried to get him to take a plea deal first, basically admitting he did something that he was on video not doing, and then they would drop the charges. That's how the system, the legal system, will leverage people sometimes just to make it all go away. But now you're still stuck with this on your record. So, yeah, it is insane, the stuff that goes on. And I don't, to this day, I don't even understand what they were hoping to achieve by towing his truck and taking his stuff. I guess they figured if he didn't have enough money to, or if he didn't beat the charges, I guess, the case, then they would get to keep this stuff. I don't know. It was insane, though. So just one more, there's the old saying, who's watching the watchers, right? And it's scary to see what some not all, because we're not anti-law enforcement or law and order, but I at least speaking for myself anyway, but I am very, very much against people that want to violate our rights. And this was, in my opinion, a very clear violation. The guy broke no laws that I could see. And the lawyers that were talking about it said the same thing. So, I hate to say it, but anymore, the safest way to deal with law enforcement, in my opinion, is to not have to interact with them unless you have to. Because I just saw another story the other day. It was a body cam video and everything else of this guy who was the security at this store, and he was locking up the building at the end of the day. Cops arrived. They had a burglary call. They show up, and they see this guy walking out behind the building. They hold him at gunpoint, scream at him, and all this other stuff. Long story short, after the whole thing's done, they find out they were at the wrong address. So this poor guy is just doing his job, security no less. And he wasn't dressed in any kind of uniform, so I don't know if it was just an informal security type position or that was part of his responsibilities, among other things. But he's just doing his job, locking up the shop at the end of the day. And the cops got him at gunpoint. They're screaming at him, talking about all this. I mean, you could tell they were trying to escalate it and free case this dude into a whole mess. And come to find out, halfway through the whole thing, they get it over the radio that they're at the wrong address. Now, at that point, do they stop messing with this guy and leave him alone and go to the right address? Nope. They continue to argue with this guy who did nothing wrong, but their egos got engaged, and they refused to disengage and go do their job, at least some of them. And they were sitting here still arguing with this guy who was treated wrongly, in my opinion, and he certainly believes so too. So, you just never know who you're gonna run into. And it's just sometimes better to avoid those encounters, if at all possible, in the first place. You never know what you're going to get. Excuse me one second. The other thing I like, where are we at on time? Okay, I got a minute. The other thing I like to watch, have you guys seen this channel? It's on YouTube. I've watched his videos for several years now. I should probably subscribe or join his donation list or whatever, or his, pay for the channel or whatever membership. It's Don Shipley, and he does the phony Navy SEALs. Now this guy, this guy is a former Navy SEAL himself, or he's currently, and however he's retired. So however you want to phrase it, he's still a Navy SEAL, whatever. But he was in the Navy for, I don't know how long, 20 or 24 years, something like that, as a SEAL. And he has access to the Navy SEAL database, and he's got a lot of history with the SEALs. And so basically people go to him to verify when people claim to be a Navy SEAL, whether it's to gain an advantage in employment or just to pick up chicks or to make, get jobs or whatever in the world it is, get investors and all that kind of stuff. And man, some of the stuff these guys go... These guys will sit there and he televises, or he films the whole thing or tapes it. I don't know what the term is anymore now that we don't really use film and tape. But he records it, I guess, and including the phone calls and everything else. And man, some of the lies these guys tell, they just completely rip off movies like Black Hawk Down, and they'll throw in a few elements of like Roadhouse and Rambo in there. And they're just telling the biggest whoppers. There's missing in action elements in there, like the Chuck Norris films, missing in action, all this stuff. And it is just absolutely insane. A lot of Jason Bourne stuff too. I'm a ghost. I was erased by the CIA. You can't find my military records. So I don't give a lot of shout outs on the show because I never know when somebody's going to turn out to be a complete wacko or whatever else. And I like people to make their own decisions, but I love watching that dude's videos because he does not let these guys slide at all. And he posts, as the kids say today, he posts all the receipts. He puts up all the proof. He'll even oftentimes put in their pictures of their DD-214 and other stuff or whatever it is that he has access to show you that these guys are full of crap-ola. And yeah, most of them, here's the best part. Even when they're dead to rights, most of these guys will refuse to come clean and just take it back. Because a lot of times he'll tell them, throughout the course of their discussion when he's on to them, and you can tell they know they're being figured out, but they just won't admit. And he's like, if you cop to it, we'll move on, let this go. But if you're going to sit here and hold on to these claims, and I am going to hunt you down to the end of the earth and make sure you do not profit off of these claims of being a fake Navy SEAL. And most of them don't. They will fight it to the bitter end. Their stories just start getting more and more insane and larger and grandiose. They'll have all kinds of awards and ribbons. Like some of them will have more ribbons and awards than all of the Navy SEALs combined got during a certain time period. Like a lot of liars, they go so far over the top that it's completely unbelievable. And especially to someone like him who has a nose for this and lived that lifestyle. So anyway, that's that. Let's get into our news before we run out of time on today's fantastic MOA broadcast. Okay, we go to the Olympic National Forest in Washington. This story comes to us via KOMO News. 2 women killed by falling tree while hiking in Olympic National Forest on January 15, 2026. A day that began with sunshine and the promise of the outdoors turned tragic on a popular winter hiking route in Washington's Olympic National Forest. 2 longtime friends, experienced outdoor enthusiasts, lost their lives in a sudden and devastating accident while trekking toward Lower Lena Lake on the Lena Lake Trail. The victims were Christine Muchler, aged 70, a resident of Kitsap County, and Kathy Pickard, Pickard with a K, Pickard, age 76, also from Kitsap County. So apparently these 2 women were with a small group of friends who regularly went on hikes and outdoor adventures. They were known as an adventurous group. They were always out having fun and very active. And I mean, I'll tell you right up front, there is no upshot to the story. There's nothing I can critique on what happened to these gals. They were just walking along, and all of a sudden, a large portion of a dead fir tree unexpectedly snapped and fell across the trail and struck Muchler and Pickard and killed them both. Unfortunately, not instantly, but the branch was big enough where it dislodged some boulders on the trail and that moved them in the surrounding area. So it was a large branch. Pickard, who was 76, was killed instantly at the scene, and Muchler was gravely injured and initially still breathing when first responders arrived. And there just happened, and how lucky could you be? 2 off-duty emergency doctors happened to be on the trail and walked up and provided aid. Unfortunately, she did not make it either. But a third hiker in the group, age 74, escaped unharmed and was able to hike out and call for help. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot to learn from this because if you've ever been in the woods or anywhere when a large branch or even a smaller one has snapped and just fallen, there is very, very little in the way of warning. I mean, I have been, as a hammock camper, it's something I have to be particularly careful about because we're tying on to trees. And you don't know if there's a dead branch 10, 20, 30, 50 feet up there. Some of these trees up here in the Northwest are huge. And you can't see all the way up there. And some of the branches are enormous. And we did a story, I believe, last year in season 1 about some hikers who were killed by a falling branch or tree. It's really scary. The noise it makes when it snaps is insanely loud. It's scary. And then it just comes down so fast. Sometimes because of the way sound moves in the forest, and I've been there multiple times in fact, I had some of my gear crushed by a tree. That's how close it was. You don't even know what's going on because the way sound moves in the woods sometimes. I heard it. It sounded like it was further away, And by the time I figured out what was happening, the branch was on the ground in front of me and crushed, or at least it didn't destroy, but it crushed it. I had to dig it out, my gear. So there's nothing you can do. There's just nothing. It's just one of those things, a chance you take. It's like driving to the store. When you get on in a car on the highway or the road, there's a chance you're taking that you're going to have a collision. So sad story. And then we go barely, 100, 150, maybe 200 miles away to Mount Rainier. 2 hikers found dead. Search and rescue crews recovered the bodies of 2 climbers, 35-year-old Benjamin Ingersoll Ben Watson, 35, and 51-year-old Jerry Richter, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, it's Jiri, who went missing in the backcountry of Mount Rainier National Park near Wilson Glacier. Their bodies were found about 9,600 feet up. That's a pretty good ways up. That's over double the elevation I'm at here at 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon. In the mountain after they failed to check in with park officials and did not return by their expected deadline. So it appeared from what I read, and I've mentioned this before, the reporting on newspapers, I don't know if it's all over the world or not, but especially here in this country, in the U.S., is atrocious. I have to go sometimes through 2, 3, or 4, and sometimes even more newspaper articles to try and get all of these facts straight. And sometimes they'll have conflicting facts. Then I'll run it through an internet search, and then it'll tell me a third story, and I don't even know what to believe. So, we try and do our best, but the reporting, they don't do it in chronological or clear, linear order anymore. Facts, and if you want to call them facts, information, little nuggets are just peppered in throughout these stories, and it's very difficult to follow. So anyway, back to the story, though. According to records from the Pierce County Medical Examiner's Office, both climbers died from accidental blunt force injury, with Watson's injuries including significant trauma to the head. The exact circumstances, whether due to a fall, rock, or ice hazards, have not been publicly detailed, but the manner of death has been labeled as accidental by the medical examiner. And don't forget, falls is one of the leading, if not the leading cause of death in the great outdoors. So unfortunately, these guys did it right. They told their families. They left a schedule with the park rangers, and they did all this other stuff. It looks like somehow in this climbing expedition or this trip they were on, it looks like both of them fell. Now, who or what led up to that, I don't know. Whether it was weather, exposure, altitude sickness, illness, whatever. But they both passed, and there was nothing that could be done. Their bodies were recovered. I think they couldn't even use, did it say? Yeah, bad weather grounded aviation support on Monday, delaying access, but ground crews reached the site Tuesday and confirmed both climbers had perished. So there had been a note put out earlier in the week for a winter safety warning, but that could change on a dime. We had a week of snow up here in the mountains last week, and then we had like 3 to 5 days of 50-something degree weather right after, and melted almost all of it. And we're in the middle of winter, and there is no snow on the ground right here until you start getting out into the high desert. So, you never know what's going to happen. But, yeah, real shame. So, folks, the moral of the story, if there is one out of both of those, just be careful, because things can change on a dime out in the wilderness. I'm not a huge fan of the expression Mother Nature, but there's an old saying, if you're going to get frisky with Mother Nature, bring protection. I don't remember who said that, but I read it somewhere and it struck me as funny. Now, we talk about axes. 1 second here. Okay, now, if you've been around the bushcraft world, I'm going to try and keep this down because I want to get to a couple of minutes. I want to get to the serrated versus plain edge knife debate here momentarily. If you've been around the bushcraft and the outdoors world for a number of years, going back probably 10 years or more, there was this period of time like when YouTube was really starting to explode and people were not just like filming themselves doing things, they were actually creating content, that we had the golden age of axes and bushcraft, in my opinion, or however you want to label it. You call it whatever you want. I'm tired of arguing with people of axes and axe videos. And what these guys would do, some of them were really good. Some of them were downright weird and a few other words I won't use on the radio here. But they would make these nice, like sometimes 20, 30, 40, 50-minute long videos of them taking their axe, and they'd be wearing their sometimes like their Renaissance fair type stuff or their colonial type outfits, or sometimes just like all wool and that kind of stuff, vintage type outdoor gear and clothing, and they would hike into the woods and film themselves from all these different angles. and they would take their $300 or $400 designer axe, and they would use it to do all the components to make a small fire, and then boil up a cup of coffee, or cook a couple of slices of bacon or a steak or something, and then film the whole thing, get all the soundtrack and the sizzling noises and the crackling of the fire and all this stuff. And they really were, I mean, it was almost like some sort of homoerotic love session they had with these axes and the lighting and the YouTube editing and stuff like that. But and I'm not really knocking the guys. Some of them did a really good job, even though I thought it was kind of goofy on some of them. I'm sure they think a lot of things I do and believe are goofy, so whatever, tit for tat. But some of them did take it a little too far. It's like, okay, do you need an intimate moment alone with that axe there, buddy? I mean, what exactly are you doing, with your 3 layers of wool on and all this stuff, and you're, taking this axe and like just stroking it and caressing it and all this stuff. Anyways, I guess the question is, are axes useful? I don't think most people, I'll put it like this. I have never, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, been hiking with anyone who carried an axe on the trail. Now, let me be clear. Number 1, just like the following article or the following discussion on serrations, do whatever you want, man. Do whatever you want to do. I have lived all over the United States, or at least a number of different locations, cold ones, warm ones, and kind of everything in between. And I have never really found it necessary to bring an axe, which is pretty heavy and unwieldy. And while it can be used for other things, it's not nearly as much of an effective multi-tool, in my opinion, as a mid-sized knife. I've never had to take one with me. I tried, I think, once, and I was like, I just got tired of carrying the weight. It just wasn't worth it to me. I didn't find myself having to chop down or process that much lumber. And frankly, if I did, I found saws to be much, much more efficient and require much less work. And frankly, they're much less dangerous too. If you ever want to wonder or find out how dangerous axes are, do an image search of axe injuries. And let me tell you, that is not something you want to happen to you while you're out in the wilderness, especially if you're alone. So I guess the question would be, what will you use? Because I've taken all different kinds of choppers, big knives, machetes, axes. I've used kukris, bolos. I mean, just about I'm a knife guy, right? I'm a knife maker by profession, and I have never really been into axes. Now, the guys that do, that's great. I think it also depends on your environment. If you're going to be hiking, camping, survival, what exactly you're going to be doing with it is, now, if I had to be in a place where I had to build, some kind of like survival shelter or a shelter of any kind, yes, an axe is going to skyrocket in terms of importance and efficiency for making a shelter, because that's going to be, the way to chop down trees and everything else and produce lumber for like a long log fire or other things. Axe is going to do fantastic. But I have just never really found it that necessary. In fact, I'll tell you this, the last probably 8 to 10 years, let's see, I can tell you, it was around 2013, 2015 is when I designed, I believe, and built the safe knife, the SAFE, safe, the SS1, which is like a 4 3/4 inch blade. After I designed and started building those, that's probably the largest knife I have taken with me, other than like for a day hike, in going on a decade. Because I just found I didn't need to process that much lumber. For me personally, even here in the wet Pacific Northwest, I would just pick up stuff that was either on the ground and either split it with a knife or get the fire hot enough and burn it anyway. If it was too long, then I would burn it in half or into thirds or whatever with the fire and just continually, steadily feed it. I just didn't have the desire and the need, I should say, to go out there and do a lot of chopping. So this is not, it's not a knock on axe guys. If you ever go back and look at some of those YouTube videos, I'm telling you, some of this stuff was downright homoerotic. They were really, I guess homoerotic technically isn't the correct word, but it sounds good. We're not going to just explore that here on the air, but it was bizarre, to say the least, in my opinion, the relationship some of these guys seem to have with their axes and stuff. But someone made some good content, and I think it's kind of stinks for them, because I think that was before the monetization of the different social media platforms, really kind of took off. So I'll bet a lot of them didn't get reimbursed very much for a lot of hard work and video editing and stuff. Now, the remuneration has gone up, and the ease of editing and producing content has become tremendously easier. So, it is what it is. Okay, let's get on to our next one. This is one I like, a discussion. It comes up all the time. This is the serrated edges versus plain edges on your knives. Folks, up front, let me tell you, by all means, buy and use whatever you want. This what I'm about to tell you and discuss here is not me trying to change your mind or get you to get serrated knives or non-serrated knives or whatever. This is to go over the basic talking points of that debate, okay? This comes up on the forums from time to time. I get emails about this. I have conversations about this occasionally with people about it and stuff and so forth. For some reason, the plain edge guys really seem to hate serrations, and the serrated edge guys don't really seem to care. They're like, okay, whatever it is, just give me a knife and I'll do it. That's been my experience, okay? But the point is to cover the pros and cons of each and show that serrations are not nearly as limited as people think. I usually encounter this primarily in like the knife enthusiast and bushcraft crowd. You know, mostly the guys sit there and stare at their knives and take Instagram photos with them and like make one feather stick and then get 30 pics out of it and put it on Instagram and TikTok or whatever in the world of social media, Facebook they use. And then sit there and talk about it and do what they call tabletop reviews. Most of the guys that use knives don't really care that much. And you can do most everything with both types of edges. Most everything. Okay? Most of these things, these debates and arguments, they really come from guys that would rather argue about it and talk about it instead of go out and actually use their knives or back up their points, no pun intended, with actual photographs or videos or experience. So let's go through a couple of points. Number one of the pros, this is definitely pro serration here, they can continue to cut long after the plain edge is dull. This is probably the biggest advantage to serrations. They accomplish this through a variety of methods here. Number one is by having serrations, you're actually increasing the length of the edge. If you were to straighten out those curved edges, the serrations, the edge would actually be longer, thus creating a longer cutting edge on the knife. The second and the primary means by which they continue to cut after even getting dull are the points. Now, there are different types of serrations that have different types of points and so forth. But the bottom line is it's like a saw. Even if the edge is dull, it can continue to rip and tear with those teeth, the serrated teeth on there, the points and the valleys and everything else, whatever you want to call it. Okay, number two, a common statement in this debate is my keyword here, sharp, all caps, sharp, plain edge knife can do anything a serrated edge can do and do it better. Again, the key word is sharp. In a lot of cases, I will grant you that is probably true or is true. When your plain edge knife is razor sharp and fresh, it will cut just as well, if not smoother, and outshine maybe a serrated blade for a lot of tasks. Okay. However, where this becomes critical is once that plain edge starts to dull. As a plain edge knife starts to dull, it becomes essentially, once it reaches full dullness, it's almost useless other than to hurt yourself with. Okay, no amount of slicing and sawing will make that blade cut anymore once it's totally dull. Okay, that is where the serrations shine because they continue to cut. It's not pretty, but they continue to cut via ripping and tearing. And there are certain types of materials, things like burlap and dirt and clay and plastic and other things that are highly fibrous and even abrasive that will dull those edges much quicker. That is where serrations, I've told the story before, I'll tell it briefly now. There were years ago, I was working on a job where I was cutting lots of plastic and like clay and dirt embedded burlap, like on tree bulbs. And I had a knife, it would dull the edge in 3 or 4, maybe 5 cuts. So I had to manually go in there with a buddy and add serrations to that knife so that it would, and then boom, it would continue to cut all day, even if it was dull, because it now would sit there and rip and tear. So that is the advantage. Is it as pretty? No, I get it. Everybody wants to look like Rambo or like Anthony Hopkins on the edge when he holds up that clip point blade to the camera and he stares and, you know, whatever it is that he says his catch line is in that movie or whatever not. A plain edge blade looks cool. It's more beautiful. I get it aesthetically. It's more attractive and pleasing. 100% with you. But you cannot deny the ability and the aggressive nature of the serrated edge. Okay, another one, and we're going to keep this moving here. Serrations can't make all the cuts I routinely perform with my knife. Really? Really? Do you really believe that most people, now there may be a few examples or a few exceptions where this is true, but how many people do you think use their knife on a daily basis and make cuts that a serrated blade cannot do? It's possible, but highly unlikely there are more than a few examples of this. I've done videos and there are a ton of pictures opening packages, cutting cordage, cutting tape, cutting paper, carving feather sticks, making bow drill sets and trap triggers, which involve 90-degree cuts and notches with no problem with a serrated edge. In fact, in some cases, it does it better than the plain edge because it really helps to bite in there and you can lever out the cut and make nice, sharp 90-degree corners for like trap triggers. In reality, in most cases, with few exceptions, like actual dedicated wood carving knives, different story, in most cases, it's a skill or a practice issue instead of the actual tool. Okay, it's your skill or ability. If you practice more, you're going to find you can do almost anything. I recently did not an article, but a series of posts on a forum where I laid out all these different tasks with photographic evidence to back it up, where I was cutting all these different things with multiple different types of serrated edges to show it doesn't really make much of a difference for probably 90 to 95% of daily tasks. And if you don't believe that, then ask yourself, how often do you really have the need or the desire to cut paper or open a package with the neatest, cleanest possible slice? I mean, is that even a real thing? Do you really care when you open up an Amazon package that it has a perfectly smooth cut? Or are you worried about getting it open with a pocket knife or whatever and getting what's inside? Now, again, if you prefer plain edge knives, do whatever you want, man. That is the beauty of the free market and everything else we have going on. Tons of selection. Get whatever you want. This is how I always wrap up the debate and the discussion about serrations, and how I'll wrap it up today. If all else fails, let's have a cutting contest. You take your plain edge knife, and I'll take a serrated knife, and we'll start by cutting zip ties, dirty burlap from tree bulbs, electrical wire, etc., and see who's the last man standing. And I can guarantee you who the last man standing will be. And it's not because of my skill or ability. It's because those things will dull a plain edge very, very, very quickly, whereas a serrated blade will continue to go on. Go cut one zip tie with a plain edge knife. Not snap it, not lever it, or break it. Slice through one thick industrial type zip tie with your plain edge, and then do it with a serrated blade and see what the results are. Case closed. Okay? But again, folks, here is the beauty of the open market and the massive selection that we have today in the knife world. Buy and use whatever you want. Whatever makes you happy, get it. We've got literally thousands, if not more, options. Get whatever you want. Get what makes you happy and use it. I'm not trying to convince you or change your mind about serrations, but everything I just said, those are facts. Now, if you can go and prove me wrong, you have done me a favor. Okay, you didn't make me feel bad. You did me a favor if you prove me wrong. But I don't think you're going to have much success in that particular topic with the framework or the parameters that I laid out. So there you go. But if you can, great, let me know. Shoot us an email, info@gearconvoy.com. We'll be happy to discuss it with you. All right, folks, it's that time now. We go to Florida. This story comes to us via WFAA.com. Florida woman holding toddler attacks enterprise employee with a selfie stick. Straight out of the news, folks. An angry customer walked into a Florida Enterprise rent-a-car waving a selfie stick and yelling Tuesday, "If you don't give me my money, I'm gonna... and then I swear I will... till you get it stuck all the way up in your..." Titonia Lee Palomino. Titonia Lee Palomino, 23, had called the store minutes earlier, arguing with an employee and eventually the manager about a credit card payment for a car rental. Now, folks, I can tell you that can be confusing or frustrating. I had my own 8-month-long saga with a rental car company that left me ready to take a selfie stick down there and take care of business myself. But alas, I digress. After hanging up, Titonia drove to the Boynton Beach Enterprise location and entered the store with a metal collapsible 42-inch long selfie stick in her her right hand and her 2-year-old daughter in her left hand, according to a Boynton Beach Police Department report. Allegedly. Palomino of Lauderhill, Florida yelled, "Do you know who my baby daddy is?" Among other threats, and others were heard shouting, "Give me my stinking money before I out of your with my foot." I will knock the out of your all day long. She then allegedly uttered threats and swung the stick back and forth. The employee dodged the stick. Palomino, that is to say, Titonia, told police she waved the stick because she was afraid the employee was going to throw something at her from behind the counter. She also said she always holds a selfie stick in her hand, as well as her keys, and she was going to take pictures at the counter. Her cell phone was not attached to the stick, and no one was injured. Palomino faces child neglect and aggravated assault charges. We wish you luck, Titonia Palomino, in all of your endeavors. That's going to do it, folks. Remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare for. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.